kind of a challenge sometimes, isn't it? Celebrate who we are. So thank you for making the effort. That's part of what love is all about, is being willing to see that truth, looking past the ego into spirit. You know, we're getting close to the end of our message series on the abundant flow, and I've been feeling the energy, feels like maybe just in our country, but my hunch is it's kind of spreading out across the world right now, that there's this concern for security in our lives, which made me want to start this series. And I'm not sure if you could give me a very clear answer if I were to say, how would you describe the abundant flow? So I'm not going to ask you to try and do that right now. This is an actual opportunity for you to just hear a quick review. Because the abundant flow can be described in a lot of different ways. And we started by reminding ourselves that the very air that we breathe, the very foundation of the planet, the universe itself, began from the mind of God and planted a seed into an idea of a seed into what we call divine substance, that invisible spiritual energy that's everywhere present. And I kind of see it as if spirit gave part of itself into this universe and lowered its frequency so that it could be seen and touched and tasted. We call it physical versus non-physical. So it's giving of itself, it's expressing of itself, and it never runs out, which is why we know that our abundance is everywhere present. It's what turns into the physical, as we read in Scripture, that what's invisible becomes visible, everything that we see. So that's a relief when we're seeking security, and that this substance responds to divine law. And I think if there was ever a law that could provide for everything we need, it's the one that's operating as the main directive to our universe, which is that law that says what you think about expands. Because the more that you think and therefore believe about something and therefore start feeling your agreement with that, it begins to radiate its own frequency, and the universe and the law is designed to pick up on your frequency and bring back more of that to you. So it usually begins with more thoughts of the same kind, and then from there it just starts to expand into ultimately having physical things in front of us. And should it appear that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, major crisis is happening everywhere you look, I want you to remember that law. Will you move through it in fear and therefore just reproduce what it is you don't want? Or can you remember the truth? That Spirit's divine ideas are always available to us, and we can plant them anytime into that substance. And don't forget that that substance is meant to be used and enjoyed and also circulated. So we can't just keep hoarding it and expect it to work for us. At some point, it stops moving in your life. So we talked about how our flow is something that circulates, and we also talked about how the way to experience it more easily is for our consciousness to align with the divine mind through gratitude and through humor. Do you remember last week we had a few laughs? And also we were and are giving away these booklets, The True Spirit of Gratitude. So if you weren't here last week, pick one up. They're right by the front door. They're free, and they'll help remind you of all kinds of ways to be grateful in your life. That raises our energy, aligns us with Spirit, makes it more available to us, that abundant flow, where we can move through life in peace. And if I had to say what is the core essence of this flow, I would say that it's love. And we describe love in a lot of different ways, but one of the ones that I've heard recently, and I can't remember who said it, up here on the screen, love is the vibration of existence itself. Love is the vibration of existence itself. So the fact that we can be here, the fact that the universe can be here, is because it's being expressed out of the frequency of love. That's why it's so important that we love, because once we align our consciousness and feelings with love, we are now in alignment, perfect alignment with our abundant flow. So again, when the world is going to hell in a handbasket, if we can get back to love we raise ourselves up above the problems that are going on. You know, it says in the scripture that love is the fulfillment of the law. And I think probably when it was written, it was referring to the 10 Commandments law, where if you loved, of course, you're going to love your neighbor as yourself. Of course, you're going to love your parents. But I think beyond that, let's look at the law that I just talked about, that law of attraction. When you love, you fulfill that law. So let's say that you're going through a difficulty with someone else, that you're in conflict with someone else. Typically, the law responds in like kind, so you just get more of that conflict. And if you remember that love will heal this, if we can move into that energy and frequency of love, that's when God enters. That's when God moves. That's when God heals through us. And so it basically cancels out, you know, the karma, so to speak. I don't know if anybody understands karma, because every time I hear somebody describe it, they describe it differently. So let's just say it cancels out the normal results, the law of attraction, because now we've engaged a power higher than whatever our conflict was expressing at. Now we're up above the repercussions of that conflict. And that's how love fulfills the law for our good. So it's about introducing love. Hey, doesn't that sound simple? Yeah, I mean, really, one thing, love. All we have to do is love. All we need is love. Na, 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 na. Okay, so what if we could learn how to solve all of our problems that way? I'm actually going to ask Jill to come up here, and we're going to run around the room, and I want to ask you, why don't we love others? Raise your hand. Jill's coming to you. Raise your hand. Why don't we love others? Hold on one second. Are we there? Say it again. It's on. Okay. We don't love others because we're judging or we're afraid. All right. Up here. Oh, there's one. Say it again.
Sense toxic behaviors in others.
Yes. So they have to behave the way we want them to behave before we're willing to give that love. Marjorie.
Triggers or past trauma.
Triggers or past trauma. Kevin had one over here if you want to reach over, Jill. Back. Oh, sorry. Kevin, don't take it personally. Go ahead to Susan.
Sometimes just so wrapped up in our own world.
We're all totally self-focused. Yeah, okay. Kevin has one up here. Raise your hand and we'll get to you. Why don't we love others?
The great thing about it is a lot of what I had, y'all said it, so this is great. But you got something I want. I feel threatened.
Yeah. Okay, over on this side of the room, there's two of them over here. You're going to reap quite the reward over there, Jill. Raise your hand again, Tim. Let her know where she's coming. Thank you.
My perception that people are being cruel to others.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Value.
Right.
So that's it.
They're being cruel. They don't deserve love, of course. Further back, Loretta.
I feel the hardest time to love others is when it's hard to love myself.
When it's hard to love myself. Can we all relate to that? Anybody else? Last chance. Okay, Keishan's over here. Coming around, Keishan.
I would say it's not about not loving somebody. It's when you have to choose whom to love more.
Oh.
And what to love more. So that if you're focusing on loving one thing, then sometimes that means that you're loving something less or judging something or distastefully reacting to something else.
Okay.
So it's, I guess, just a response to loving something other than what that particular thing or person is.
Okay. And a little bit of that I'm hearing is that we kind of work with the idea that there's only so much. There's only so much available, or that it has to fall within a certain criteria, which one is better, which one is more deserving. Thank you, Jill. So lots of reasons they're not worthy. I just basically don't like you. You know, I can't love you when I don't like you. Or what if we love them and they reject us? You know, and they don't give us the love back, or they don't love us first. You know, they're going to have to do it first before I offer it back. Or they might hurt me, they may fail me in some way. And probably the number one reason why we don't just gush with love for people is they're different. They don't have to have done anything bad except be different from me. And if there's anything that might happen in this world for us, you know, as we're going through this season of whatever, it's probably a conflict based on those differences. I'm just going to ask you to do your best. You know, I swear I'm going to get back to this topic probably in July about open-mindedness. See what it says, the subtitle there, the doorway to higher thoughts, that when we can open our minds to truth, to spirit, to love, it opens our mind to all kinds of wonderful thoughts. So let's just start to be mindful of when it's hard to love. And you might even want to start by asking yourself what love is. I mean, besides the fact that we've discovered it's the nature of existence, it's what this universe is made of, it's also a level of consciousness. It's an attitude that we get to choose or not. And it becomes a way of seeing things. So I want you to just take a breath, close your eyes for a minute, and ask yourself silently, is it easier for me to love most of the time or judge most of the time? Just notice which way you lean. And if it's more about judgment, first of all, know you fit right in with the human condition. Very common for our ego to behave that way. But I'm always fascinated with people who have died and come back to life. Anyone here heard any of those stories from near-death experiencers? Yeah. So I came across a new book. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to have this gentleman and his partner. She had 3 near-death experiences, and then he's written a book called 10 Life-Changing Lessons from Heaven. And in that, several comments from people, and he calls them NDEers, of their experience outside the body. So this is when the body shuts down and the spirit leaves the body, and it remembers who it is, and it's more into the spiritual dimension now, and there's no more secrets. And, well, I don't know if that's true. I think they kind of shield us from certain things unless we decide, nope, we're not coming back. But anyway, I could talk about that all day, I think. And what he discovered was that almost every single one of them said something about the fact that this state of existence we're in and why we're here and what we're meant to experience, it's all about love. So let me share a variety of comments with you today. First of all, under the topic that God's all-encompassing unconditional love is always here for us, but we really know that when we leave the body. So what I'm going to try and get you to do is start seeing it here and now while you're in the body, okay? Because I think you're going to be here a while. So here's some of the comments. It was just wave after wave of pure love. It was within me. It was around me. It was everything. I remember reading somewhere else somebody's experience, and they said there were buildings and they had walls, but they were made of love. Yeah. I'd like to think that's the core foundation of everything we see here. But because we're in this lower dimension, it's hard to see. Somebody else said, unconditional love is endless and unifies everyone and everything in this universe. So because there's one presence and one power, that's what creates unity. Don't you love the name of our spiritual community? It reminds us every time we say it, there's only one presence. It's unified by the power and the consciousness of love. Someone said, every interaction is meaningless if love is not attached to it in some way. Every relationship, meaningless. Every interaction, meaningless. Think about that every time you stand at a checkout counter or a drive-through window, that you have the opportunity to offer love. Actually, got an egg sandwich 2 days in a row this week at a drive-through. And the first day, I know everybody there at the restaurant. I know them by name. We always say hi. And this time I heard a new voice on the speaker. And this time I was in a place where they were supposed to bring it out to me, in the parking lot. And everything about this experience was new. So I waited and I waited and I waited. I'd sent my little thing on the phone and still no response. So I got out of my car and I went inside because you know how patient I am. And I rang the bell and somebody new came to the window and I told her who I was and why I was there. And I said, this is new for me and I wasn't really planning on it going this way. Is this new for you? Because I was trying to figure out if she was just getting started on her first day. And she said, I'm not having a very good day. She said, it's just going kind of slow. I'm sorry about that. And we talked a little bit more and then I left. Well, the next day I went, everything just went like clockwork and it was the same person. And I said, so are you having a better day today? And she just went, oh, it was almost like the force of love hit her. And her eyes got big and then she smiled because I remembered her. I recognized her. And I just felt at that moment, but trust me, I practice all week long on whatever it is I'm talking about. Spirit gives me all kinds of, so I was intentional about this. I've had really bad days at the drive-thru too. So I was intentional about this. And I said, I know everyone's name except yours. She told me her name. She was just visiting from another store and helping out. So we had a nice chat. And I drove away with my heart lighter. And I'm hoping her heart felt lighter. Every interaction is meaningless if love is not attached to it in some way. See how easy that is? It's almost easier with strangers because you don't know any history. You just offer it. One other person said the most important thing we can do while we're alive is to learn how to love. Isn't that interesting that even though it's the core of our being, we have to learn, or our higher self gets to teach our lower self how to love. So this is from the author that put all these things together. Up on the screen, Jeff Jansen says, it's as if our earthly lives were specifically created to provide us with millions of opportunities to learn and demonstrate love. We get to experience the power of love in action and feel the negative consequences of a lack of love, learning what it means to love ourselves and others despite interacting with those who act in unloving ways seems to be the primary purpose of life, according to these NDEers. So here's the thing. This actually, because it's a choice, love is a choice, it takes responsibility. We must learn how to become responsible for bringing the love into a situation. When we were asking earlier why we don't love others, it's because sometimes we're expecting them to love us first, just to make sure that it's going to be safe. But what if we're really here to be the one who is first in line to love and see what happens next? So in regards to that, taking responsibility, some folks from near-death experiences said, I recognize that my most painful experiences taught me most to know that I was not a victim of circumstances. I learned that being charitable, patient, and forgiving toward others are some of the most important character traits to be acquired in the school of life. Patient, charitable, and forgiving. All ones that the ego would say, ouch, that's hard. Another one said, everything is about relationships. So hear that. Not money, not beauty, not power, but relationships and taking care of each other. We aren't expected to be perfect, but we are expected to learn, to get better and better at letting this be natural for us. And then finally, a true heart, which is motivated by loving compassion, is what matters in our life. Our job, J-O-B, is to try to love one another no matter what. Not just our spouse, but to find out how to love our enemy, because that is why we are here. So imagine as spiritual beings, we're in this dimension where there's only love and bliss. We purposely come to a lower dimension where there is experiences of not love. What must that feel like to the spirit? And What can we do to bring that love that we brought with us out into the open to transform this lower dimension? It's our job, not the one that pays you every month, but the one that we came here to do above everything else, to love. So, having difficulty loving others? Anybody here had difficulty loving others? Sometimes it's about the fact that what is in me is actually aligning with something that's in them. Remember the law of attraction? So the universe is just drawing to us what we are being, what we are believing, what we are holding in consciousness or subconsciousness. So you might want to look at that. You also might want to just ask yourself that maybe there's something in myself that I'm not loving, and I see it in them, and makes it harder for me to love them. This is why it's important we want to focus on loving ourselves first. Now, I was raised in a Christian tradition where I was told regularly that I was not worthy of God's love. I think we've had it wrong for a long time. And it is hard for humans, especially who've been trained that way, to start loving themselves because we're told that's just arrogant, right? That shame on you. That's your ego. That's your, what do I keep hearing? Sin nature. Yeah. So the only nature that really matters in your life is your spiritual nature. And that's what we want to keep being and bringing forth and allowing to dominate. So it's a lot easier for the ego to look at ourselves instead of saying, hey, I am a worthy chap. Chap, where did that come from? Must have been British in another life. No, instead it's look at that flaw and 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 all those flaws. That's what's easy for us to see. Either because we've been raised in an environment of criticism and a lot of judgment, or we've just learned how to do it ourselves. But we established that belief early on, nobody wants me because I'm not measuring up. That's the ego's nature. It's to compare itself to others and see how we're doing. Did you hear this old saying, keeping up with the Joneses? Actually, that was a real family, I hear, of wealth. And it became a saying, like, we're all trying to keep up with the Joneses. And then we never measure up. So none of that is serving us, and yet we come away with this feeling of guilt for all the mistakes that we've made, that we're affirming we're not good enough. And the less we love ourselves, just let this sink in here, the less we love ourselves, the harder it is for others to love us. Think about that. I mean, you can sense it. Can't you sense it in others when they don't love themselves? And unless you're awake, unless you are aware of your own nature of love, it's really easy to just go, well, if they don't believe in themselves, why should I? Yes? So here's a few more comments from the NDEers when they, came from that human experience and now they're feeling the presence of unconditional love. One person said, I was healed in a nanosecond of my low self-esteem, guilt, and inability to love myself fully. Healed in a nanosecond when he's in this presence of unconditional love. Somebody said, I saw myself through the eyes of God and realized I was actually a beautiful child of the universe who was loved unconditionally simply because I exist. What a great reason to be loved. Because I exist. Someone said, I didn't have to believe or do anything to deserve love, nor did I need to prove myself to earn it. I was perfect. And finally, my worth is in being who God made me to be. I don't have to make everyone else happy. So many of us who suffer with that, what's that word when you're having to make everyone else happy first? There's another word. Codependent. Thank you. Yeah. That until they're happy, I can't be happy. But The true happiness comes when we are being what our true spirit is designed to be. And each one of us is unique, so of course it should not compare to anyone else. It should just be you, being you. So let's talk about practicing self-love. And the practice is not going to be about how to become worthy. It's going to be about accepting our worthiness. So that kind of takes us off the hook right there. A lot less work. Just accept your worthiness. And we've got a lifetime of lies that we've been told that we're going to have to undo in order to be accepted. I mean, rarely do we get approval that we're seeking. It's easier to hear than even when people give you compliments, you can't receive them because you're not in that dimension. Wow, this multi-dimension thing is really starting to play out for me. And it's basically just whatever level of consciousness you're at, that's all you see. You see that? So if you're one of those people who are regularly criticizing yourself and live in low self-esteem, and somebody gives you a compliment, you can't receive it. Sometimes you can't even hear it because you're not in that dimension. Does that make sense? Okay, if we, scientifically, if we honed everything down to its most common denominator, it's going to be energy, and all energy vibrates at various frequencies. So where do you think that came from? Spirit. Spirit's energy. Spirit is vibrating. So science and spirit coming together here at Unity in Naperville. Welcome. So if we can just get to that place where we don't have to prove ourselves to others and be okay with the mistakes that we make, flaws are going to be normal for us. So, of course, we'll make mistakes. And can we learn from them and forgive ourselves? So, true confession. See what this is? It's a sponge. Yeah. So I was here earlier this week and I noticed the refrigerator. I'd been noticing that this stainless steel refrigerator out there with this marking on the freezer door that looked like rust. I don't know what it was, but I got out a bottle of Fantastic and some paper towels and I squish, and I rub, and nothing. It was still there. I thought, well, maybe the paper towel isn't strong enough. So I grabbed one of these little sponges here, and I thought that this was a non-scratch material. Because I have kind of a similar one that's made out of plastic. Well, guess what? I got these at the dollar store. You remember when we gave these away a few months ago, and there was like 5 for $1 or 8 for $1? So I just figured, this can't be like an SOS pad. This has to be like, so I'm squirt, rub. Oh, it's coming off. Rub harder. I get all the soap off, and I look at no stain. And y'all can go out there and view it. So when you see this very obvious section of scratching on this stainless steel refrigerator, it was me. And I took that mistake home and I beat myself up for that. And every time I thought of it, my stomach just went like that. Shame on you, Kitty. What an idiot. How could you be so stupid? I mean, I have a pretty loud criticizer that will always be watching. Are you perfect? If not, wow, shame on you. Bad kitty. So the only thing I could think of is, well, maybe I could go back and take that and just scrub the whole freezer door so it all matches. But I'm not kidding. I just finished doing this message like the day before. So I'm thinking, okay, opportunity to love myself through the mistakes. Yes, people are flawed. Yes, people make mistakes. But it has nothing to do with your self-worth. Nothing to do with your self-worth. And what can I learn from that? I will never use this sponge again. Val has a solution I can see, so let's talk later. First person I thought it was somebody that actually helped us put this place together, Carol Gadbaugh. But maybe she's got some secret. But anyway, I'm getting off track. All that to say, learn from your mistakes, but more importantly, learn to love yourself anyway. Love yourself anyway, because when you go down that hill of shame and blame and guilt, you're just moving into the lower frequency where you cannot receive divine ideas to solve your problems. You're working against yourself. So this is Sanea Roman's suggestion. I love sharing her thoughts on this. Love all the parts of yourself, even those thoughts and feelings you may have labeled as negative. If you feel anger or doubt, love those feelings as much as you love your feelings of joy and peace. If you feel unforgiving or unloving, love those feelings too. Love all of what you call your imperfections. You don't change them by denying or hating them. You change them by loving them. As you love your negative feelings, you can evolve into their positive expressions. So if we can't, well, I'll just tell you, we can't accept others until we've learned to love ourselves first, because we're trying to love them from a flawed point of view, right? We haven't even figured it out for ourselves. So we have to start with ourselves. Yes, the mistake maker that we have labeled ourselves to be is part of ourself, but it's not our true self. Our true self is spirit, and that will go on without any of those flaws. So it's a chance for us to continually listen to your higher self. It's just nudging you, dare to be me. When it says the word me, we're talking spirit. Dare to be me. Be a little bit more of me today, of who I was born to be, as some of these folks are saying. So that means focusing on our passions and our gifts more and daring to be that person so that we're living our purpose. And why? Because that puts us into our abundant flow. And now we're able to receive all the good that God has for us. But it's starting by loving ourselves. One last NDE let me share with you. Without loving myself first, I'd never be able to go on to truly love or help others. For the first time, I felt that I didn't need to worry about anything other than being who God made me to be. It was such a sense of relief to feel that I was good enough and to believe it with my heart. So I want you to consider what it would be like. What would your world be like? What would the world be like if we all learned to stop judging ourselves? You know, there's one thing about noticing we made a mistake and then fixing it, but we don't have to throw in the judgment along with it. What would it be like if we learned how to move through life that way? Who's come into contact with Louise Hay and her writings? Yeah. She's on the other side now, but at this point, she's left so many wonderful books for us. And one of my favorites is called Life Loves You. And she wrote it with Robert Holden. And in this book, Robert was asking her, if you could teach a class to children across the world, what's the one class that you would want to teach? And she said, I'd want to teach making friends with your mind. Yeah. Making friends with your mind. She said, and I would teach the teachers and the parents too. Making friends with your mind. And he said, okay, cool. How does that work? And she says, well, first of all, we'd all look in a mirror, because she works with mirrors in a lot of her teachings. Look in a mirror and say to yourself, life loves you. And just let that sink in for a minute. What does that mean? Life loves you. When you lock eyes with your reflection, that can be a pretty cool moment, as long as you're taking hold of your thought. So the next thing she said was, look in the mirror and say, I love you. I really love you. First thing in the morning, out of bed, hit the bathroom, look in the mirror. I love you. I really love you. Do that regularly. And then she says, my mind is very creative, and I choose to think loving and happy thoughts today. So we're basically just retraining the subconscious. We're teaching the lower self what the truth is. We're lifting our energy to align with spirit. And then Robert got involved, and he thought about how the question we should ask ourselves is, what is it like to be me when I'm not judging myself? Think about that for a minute. I don't know about you. I've got a really loud judge. I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. I'm a perfectionist, so I always need to do everything right. And so I'm always looking for, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? And I catch it and I try to shut it down. A lot of times the word is shut up. Now I'm learning to say, peace, be still. So what is it like to be me when I'm not judging myself? And he suggested that you do this every 15 minutes. until you can settle into that space where you're not judging yourself. And what's available to you then? First of all, it's going to be love. It's going to be allowing. It's going to be open and accepting, affirming. It's going to be the real you. Once you shut down the ego and there's no more judgment, I'm going to invite you to try that. And then the last suggestion he said is say to yourself, one good thing that could happen if I judged myself less is fill in the blank. One good thing that could happen if I judged myself less is. And we might just be surprised at how free we feel, how much potential we start to tap into because we have decided to put love over judgment. Now keep in mind, judgment is just a thought, and guess who the thinker is in your mind? Yourself. Nobody else. There's no one else thinking thoughts in your mind. So you are in charge, you can change the thought, and as you think a thought long enough, it will create a feeling. So here's how the law works. Think a thought long enough, and it will create a feeling. And that feeling will then activate the law. So what we want to do is think a thought of love enough that it activates the feeling of love, that it attracts more love in our life. And now we're in that flow of abundance and giving ourselves and being ourselves as we were designed to be. And I think what you'll notice is that you'll basically just be freeing yourself and freeing the world, really. You're freeing life to mirror that back to you, and how fun is that? So give as much love as you can out into the world and to yourself. Stop focusing on resisting what you don't want. Give your love to what you prefer instead, and that high frequency energy of love will keep you right where you need to be to experience that abundant flow. It's a practice, and inwardly it's important, but I'll show you a way that you can do this where it can actually be done outwardly and it will sink in inwardly. This is a story from Lynn Grabhorn. Flowing appreciation, think love, flowing appreciation is really no big deal. You can flow it intensely to a street sign if you want. Don't laugh. I do that all the time to stay in shape. Like any skill, flowing energy requires constant practice. And there's something so absurdly satisfying about flowing buckets of love, adoration, and appreciation to slow men at work signs. I flow it to stoplights, billboards, birds overhead, a tree stump, a dead animal, a winter storm, and of course, I flow it to people. There's a game where I envision me and a perfect stranger on the street or wherever I am, rushing into each other's arms like we were old best friends who hadn't seen each other for ages. Now, she's just visualizing this, okay? You start with acceptable targets, like someone you wouldn't mind sitting next to at a lunch counter. They still have those. And then you move up bit by bit to targets that are increasingly difficult for you socially, until finally, it doesn't make any difference what kind of slob they are. You just see and deeply feel the two of you joyfully recognizing each other, flying together in this gigantic bear hug as profound love surges between you. I don't know how many people I've done that with while walking down a street and watched them turn around to look for whatever it was they felt. Love is a power, it's an energy that we can also choose to use. So practice that and see how much higher you start to live in life and how much more often you experience that abundant flow in your life. Let's do some meditation here, and I'm going to ask Kim Char to come up today, and Mark's going to come up today. Any minute now, I can feel his presence. Or Jill's going to go. Oh, there you are. You're good. Never mind. So let's just begin by closing our eyes. Feeling the chair beneath you. Allowing your body to relax. Soften the face muscles and the neck and the shoulders, the spine, the hips, the thighs, the calves, the soles of your feet, the tips of your toes and your fingers perfectly relaxed. Trusting that I am resting in the love of God. I am breathing the love of God. I am supported by the love of God, which is only knowing my goodness. I align with that love that seeks my good and works for my good. And I just appreciate that presence of love here and now.
As I know love, God entered. As I know love, God moves. As I know love, God heals. Working all things together for good.
Deep breath here, breathing in the peace that's present. A peace that passes all understanding. What would my life be like without overthinking, judgment, worry? May I choose peace and release all that is unlike God, all that is unlike love.
And as I know peace, God entered. As I know peace, God moves. As I know peace, God heals. Working all things together for good.
Feeling lighter, looking at life from the bright side. Whatever is happening in my life right now that feels heavy, I surround in light, in gratitude, in joy. So grateful, so happy that this one presence and power is working for my good.
And as I know joy, God enters. As I know joy, God moves. As I know joy, God heals. Working all things together for good.
All things, I allow all things to work together for good. For this is the truth of this loving universe. The truth of this loving universe is that I am worthy of love, that I am made of love. The truth is that this love is even now drawing forth good in my life. This is the truth of my being, so I let it be.
And as I know truth, God entered. As I know truth, God moves. As I know truth, God heals. Working all things together for good.
And as I rest in this presence of love, I am at peace. I feel the joy. I know the truth. For this divine love is the solver of all problems, is the giver of all good. And I am that love. And I allow that love. And I give that love.
And as I know love, God enters. And as I know love, God moves. As I know love, God heals. Working all things together for good.
And so it is.